Hey everyone, Regal Reviews here. So I wanted to make a video today talking about Shan and Liana, my thoughts about them and their gameplay and what I think the Survivor fans are thinking. So to get started, I didn't really have a problem with Liana at first. She seemed like she was a good fit in Yellow. It seemed like Xander, Tiffany, Evie, and Liana, they seem to have a pretty good thing going, but Liana's the one that broke ties and went to Shan. And I think this is why people don't part of the reason why people don't like Liana is because she was so willing to drop somebody that she knew since day one, and people that at that point were loyal to her over somebody who she only just met and doesn't really know anything about. Now, granted, they had that summit together, but can she really say she knew everything about Shan or felt really close to her in just those couple hours they were at the summit? With Shan, I think people don't like her because, for one thing, I think it's annoying. She keeps saying "Oh, I'm a pastor. I'm a pastor. I'm a pastor." Like in her confessional, she mentions it all the time. Like you could literally make a drinking game how many times she says that in an episode. And I think people are thinking because she says it so often that her behavior in the game doesn't model her occupation outside the game. And I think who you are outside the game and who you are inside the game are two totally different things. You might make decisions in the game that you wouldn't make in real life, but it's hard to see that because people see if they're a villain in the game of Survivor, they must be like that in real life. So I think they're kind of making an assumption on that. Maybe, and it might be true. It may not be. I think the other reason people have a problem with them is because that it looked like that they only aligned with Danny and Deshawn because they were people of color. And I think one side of that of the coin, people think that, oh, they're only aligned because they're people of color, so they're not willing to work with anybody else. They're not going to, the strategy is basically out the door because it's only going to be them four and that's it. They're not willing to talk to anybody or anything. And it's basically them versus them, And I think the other side of that, we do see that they're willing to talk with others and at least strategize with others, hear people out what they have to say. We saw Deshawn was he wasn't drawn to Evie like Liana and Shan were wham, that's it, we're close now, we're so close now. Deshawn met Evie on the summit and he was willing to talk with them and hear them out, but they weren't ooh, buddy, oh, we're this power duo now. You know what I mean? They seem like they got along on the island and everything. And we saw Shan was in alliance with Ricard. So in that aspect, they were willing to talk with other tribe mates and willing to work with other people. But then also too, one might look at it and say that they were so adamant about being in this alliance, but then we saw JD very many episodes ago. Shan didn't seem inclined to align with JD right away. In fact, she manipulated him. Say what you want about Shan, but her manipulation skills are very, very good and very impressive. And that's why people get confused, oh, if she's a pastor, she's very manipulative. I think that's where they get confused. But anyway, I'm getting off track. But she didn't feel inclined to work with JD. She said that if if he didn't give her his advantage, that there was no trust there. And the fact that he fell for that twice, I mean, I liked JD. I would have loved to see him make it to the end. But after he fell for that twice, I mean, he had to go. And I think people don't understand, like, why they're so drawn together. And I feel like here's another point, too. And again, both sides of the coin here. One, you look at it like this. There's something about it that we don't understand. Like, we don't understand what the Black community goes through, and it's something that we're learning about, willing to listen about. We saw they had great conversations about that last night on Survivor. So I feel like they have that understanding, and they have that background, and they could kind of relate to each other in a way that everybody else in the game wouldn't be able to. You know what I mean? So that's one side of it, that they feel so connected, that they feel drawn together in that sense. But at the same time, people think that well, the fact that they didn't really know each other and they're so close. Like, Liana and Shan only knew each other for a few hours, and we saw that Shan was the one who blew Liana's advantage. I mean, Liana had a pretty good advantage there, and had Shan not have told Tiffany about that, she would have been able to keep her advantage, and she very well might have been able to get Xander's idol. But because Shan said that, she basically ruined Liana's chances of getting an idol or an advantage. And I felt like, on a resume, that would have been a really good thing for Liana to have down. But now it's like gone. Now if Liana would have made it to the end, they would have said, well, you played that wrong and everything. And the fact that after that, normally if somebody made a move like that against you, or if somebody said to somebody else that, oh, so-and-so has an idol, or so-and-so has an advantage, and you find out that it was them, normally they would want to cut ties right then and there. Like, you would think, like, oh, I can't trust them. But they were still willing to work together. And when Shan left, she called Deshawn a snake. And Deshawn, we saw, like, at least 2 episodes ago, was starting to see through Shan and see that how bossy she was, but he was still voting with them. I mean, if you think somebody is that big of a threat, why don't you get them out ASAP? And I felt like Shan almost blew Deshawn's game, because Deshawn had to, have that conversation with Ricard and say, look, this isn't who I am. And even at Tribal, he was trying to say, like, this isn't who I am. He's a trusting person. And Deshawn really does seem like a good guy inside and outside the game. Like, there's certain people that you could tell, like, oh, they're genuine, but other times it's like you question, like, is this who they really are, And he just seems like a genuine person. Now, to backtrack a bit, the only people that it seemed weren't willing to work with anybody else was Danny and Liana. Danny only because, I say Danny because of his edit. We don't really see that much of Danny edit-wise. Whenever we do see him, he's usually only with Deshawn. I mean, the most I think we got of Danny edit-wise was last night when he was talking about his father and everything, and the fact that he won immunity last night, I think that's the most we got from him. So just from like an editing perspective, like it's not Danny's fault. It's the editing. We just don't really see that much interaction. And then Liana, after she went on that summit with Shan, it seemed like she was only going to work with Shan at that point, and that's it. And I think that's what people are getting confused about and everything. I think here's another thing too. I feel like people, I know for Liana anyway, they think that they're hypocritical because they, and this is just what I'm thinking the fan base might be thinking of. I'm thinking maybe that they're all about wanting to be treated like equals, but they don't treat the rest of the cast like equals. And the perfect example of that is when they were at the immunity challenge. I believe it was Erica versus Xander. Or who was it? Or Evie versus Xander. It was one of those two. And she said to somebody that, I can't stand his ugly face. Like, can you imagine if Xander said that about Liana? Can you imagine the backlash that Xander would have been facing for calling Liana ugly? I'm not saying that she is. But if Xander said that about Liana, Xander would be ostracized. It'd be like, oh my God, Xander is so sexist. That's ridiculous. Why would he ever say that about her? But it's okay for Liana to say that about him. So I feel like there's some... I feel like that's one reason why people don't like Liana, because they're being hypocritical. And I feel like going back to Shan being a pastor, her behavior in the game doesn't match being a pastor. So I think people are starting to question like if she actually is a pastor in real life, because they think like they see her behavior so in the game, they feel like, oh, she's so bossy, she's so this, like if it's not Shan's way, it's the highway. And the fact that she had that much control over people, and the fact that she was able to manipulate her way in the game, she was able to, like I mentioned, she was able to say to Tiffany about Liana's advantage, and she didn't get voted off, and she wasn't targeted over it. I mean, scratch that. Liana didn't like open her eyes and say, oh, I can't trust Shan now. And I feel like after last night too, I think they're labeling Shan as like a bitter juror, because her behavior when she was on the jury, like the look she was giving people, it seemed like she was very salty. And when Liana got voted off, she was like she thought it was so, like it looked like she thought it was so stupid. I mean, it's not that far-fetched, because they split the votes between Liana and Shan last week because they saw how close they were together, and they knew Shan had an idol. So if Shan played the idol, she'd be safe and Liana went home. If Shan didn't play the idol, then the opposite would happen. So it's not that far-fetched that Liana went home. I mean, I would have been surprised if she didn't go home last night. So, when the episode started last night, Liana was saying, it's so stupid that they got rid of Shan when Xander's in the game with an idol. But you just got rid of Shan, and you just got rid of her with an idol in her pocket. So you don't think that's stupid, but you think it's stupid to keep Xander, who has an idol. I mean, would it have been stupid to get rid of Xander but keep Shan? Like, that makes sense. Now, keep in mind they were Alliance members, so you know, that's probably why she thinks it was stupid to keep Xander. But I feel like for the most part, people think that Liana is just a brat and a follower, and I feel like people don't really respect her game because she really didn't have a game. She didn't really have any moves. Any move that she even remotely had, it was because of Shan. Say what you want about Shan, but she was in control. We all saw that, and I don't remember if I mentioned this earlier in my video, but one might argue Liana would have been perfect to take to the end because they could have said that. They could have said that, oh, she wouldn't have gotten any votes. But also keep in mind, say for conversation's sake, you have Xander, Heather, and Liana in the final three. Well, you have Danny, Deshawn, definitely Shan, and possibly even Ricard. 4 votes can possibly go to Liana. 1 definitely will, because Shan would vote for her regardless. But you have 4 possible votes for her, and 5 go the other way. I don't know how many jury members are this season. I think there might be 9. But you've got 9 votes, 4 possibly going to Liana. Then you got 4 to the other person. So the finals would come down to 1 vote. And I don't think anybody would want to take that risk of having that close of a vote. I don't think they want to base their win off a gamble. I think they want to have a sure thing. They want to take people to the end who they're sure they can be. So I'm not sure, based on who the jury would be in that scenario, if Liana could possibly have won. But she would have had definitely a case to argue with. And one last thing, I feel like people think that because of what I mentioned earlier about them being in a people of color alliance, people think that, the strategy went out the door. They were only going to be them 4, and they feel like, they only aligned with them because they're people of color. That's like me saying, like, oh, I'm only going to align with these people because they have a disability like me. I mean, I feel like, and it's totally different when you're out there in the game. We are only viewers, but I feel like you might have that connection with them. You might have that understanding, like, oh, there is somebody else like me out there. But that doesn't mean I have to vote with them. I mean, I don't have to vote with them only because they have a disability like me. You know what I mean? I feel like that's where other people what people don't understand. I feel like people are perceiving it as like they were in this alliance here and everybody on the outside was the enemy, and I don't think that was necessarily the case. But I see the aspect of them thinking like, oh, they're thinking like, oh, they only aligned with each other because they feel like they were inclined to. They don't have to feel inclined. I feel like they felt very connected and drawn to each other, but they don't have to align with them just because they're people of color. Like, if there's somebody out there with a disability like me, or somebody who had anxiety, I don't have to align with them because they have anxiety, because that's just putting me like over here and everybody else is over here. You know what I mean? So that's what my thoughts are about Shan and Liana. I definitely think it was smart of them to do that move last week to split the vote. It's not easy to split the vote, but they did it correctly, and they were able to flush an idol. And then they got rid of Liana last night, and I feel like that was the right move because of that scenario I just mentioned earlier, a little bit ago. Comment down below what your thoughts are about Shan and Liana, if you're big Shan and Liana fans or if you're not. Let me know your thoughts and feelings. Until next time, stay regal.